Well, I actually was born in Milwaukee on March 31st, 1950. The first child of Jim and Virginia Krueger. My mother was terribly nervous because I came shortly before midnight, and she was just absolutely terrified that her first child was going to be born on April Fool's Day. But luckily, I made it before the beginning of April. But my parents moved up to Reedsburg when I was 1 year old, and that's where I was raised from then on. I had 3 brothers and 1 sister.
Okay.
Family of 5. My parents sent us, all of our family, to Catholic grade school, Sacred Heart. I was actually was part of the first grade class that went all 8 years at Sacred Heart School, and then went to Holy Name Seminary in Madison for 2 years, and then after deciding that perhaps a vocation of the priesthood wasn't in my future, came back to Reedsburg High School and graduated from there in 1968. The guidance counselor suggested St. Norbert College, and I had a good enough academic track record that actually they pre-approved me for admission. I started out in history, but then after 1 year switched to business administration. I basically paid for my college education by working in the tourist boat industry in Dells for Olson Boat Company. Some valuable experience in drawing me out of my shell a little bit, because if I didn't sell guidebooks, we didn't make money. And so
when you met your wife, was she working in the Dells as well? Is that how you guys met?
Yeah, she was. She actually was working at. She was working at Chula Vista, one of the resorts there, a long family-owned business that is much different now than it was then. It's much larger.
Right.
But she and her sister came down. She actually wasn't supposed to work there, and her sister that I knew had an operation, and so Maureen decided to come down and take her place. And I remember the first time I said hello to her, she ran 1,400 miles the other way, like she was scared to death of me. And so I thought, well, this is a lady that has some attraction for me. Died of a heart attack suddenly, and I was the person that was familiar with being able to run this IBM Composer that was one of the first, I guess, computer-aided typesetting outfits out there. And so between that and the darkroom and that, it was I guess I was needed in the family printing business to to help there. I mean, it was either help or watch what they had worked so hard to build perhaps go away. And so I think the whole notion of service, whether it's in county government, in city government, really had its basis probably in my Catholic upbringing. When I decided to run for mayor, I'd just been on the council for 1 year, and we had a long-standing mayor. He'd been in office, I believe, something like 18 years, and really was part of a family that has a long, rich history in Reedsburg. And one day, one of the city, I guess, power brokers came out to see me and approached me and said, "Well, Marty, I don't know what the problem is between you and John." He said, "But I'd like to see you support him for 1 more term, and then we'll pick somebody and we'll groom him." And that just didn't resonate with me very well, because I didn't believe it was in the best interest of Reedsburg for a small group of people to pick who was going to be the next mayor. So I thought about it and decided that, doggone it, that at least I was going to try. And so I did, and actually beat this 18-year incumbent rather handily. You know, we started a second industrial park, attracted industries or held on to 2,500 more than 2,500 jobs that are there right now, including bringing Land's End to Reedsburg, which was the economic development story of the year in the state that year. We did that in 1 week. In fact, I took the down payment for the land that Land's End sits on. I wrote a personal check out and took it out to the farmer so that no one would know what was going on, because that's the way Land's End wanted it. Is that while we were out doing economic development and I was, showing the town to folks, I had to show them our movie theater, which was just abysmal. The gentleman wouldn't run the show unless you had 8 people. So I remember being in line where we only had 7, and some stranger went up the street and a guy hollered, "Hey, you want to see a show? I'll pay for it." I got to understand the economics of the movie business at that time. About how they made money. But during that last term in office, we had a father and son from Prairie du Chien, Bill Adamany Sr., Bill Adamany Jr., who owned a theater down in Prairie du Chien and a couple other small towns, approach us about bringing a multiplex to Reedsburg. I'm a big movie buff. When you get a film on the break, a larger percentage of the gate goes back to the film distribution company. Okay. The further it gets away from the break point or the release date, the more money the theater gets to keep. There, I had to come up with a special financing program, incentive to bring them there and take this risk. But after I got beat, I told the gentleman that owned the land that he had about 1 week to do this deal with Bill Adamany and bring a new theater to Reedsburg, because the gentleman that beat me, Elmer, had put "Vote for Farber" on the marquee of the theater, so I pretty much knew that this deal wasn't going to go forward after I left office. So I'm thankful that the rest is history. That we accomplished a lot in Reedsburg in the 6 years that I was in office, especially the last 2 years were phenomenal. And I would walk into Spider-Man on the break at 9 o'clock at night and see the theater 3/4 full. As I was coming out, I would tell my wife, be mayor of Reedsburg or see Spider-Man on the break. It's obvious to me. It was never about position. It's see Spider-Man on the break. And actually, the gentleman who I beat to become mayor of Reedsburg was on the county board, lived in my district, decided that he was not going to run again, and actually asked me if I would be interested in county board. I was overwhelmed. I came into this county board experience figuring that this would be simple. I'd been mayor of Reedsburg, so what's different between the city of Reedsburg and the county? This would be no sweat at all to pick this up. And I think once I got involved with county government and got an understanding of just all they did, I spent the first 2 years trying to get up to speed and to understand, try and get a grasp of the animal. Bob Cassidy and I were sat next to each other at board meetings, and Bob was a real unassuming guy. And Bob was the guy that actually said, I didn't aspire to be in county board chair. I was, as I say, just trying to get my arms around county government. But he said, I think you ought to consider it. I think we need some of the things that you can bring to the table. And so I agreed to put my hat in the ring and was elected. So my first 2 years in the board, and that's probably one of the reasons I ran for board chair, is that we had the bicycle or recreational trail enthusiasts down in the southern part of our county. We're pursuing getting the the rail bed abandoned and turned over to into a recreational trail. Those interests would push against the industrial interests in our county, who were saying that we need to preserve rail service, and there would be a lot of negative discussion and a lot of energy and hard feelings, and when at the end of it we were right back in the middle, having made no progress. How can we get them to work together, put them at the same table, and get this thing done? And so we had a stakeholder process, which I don't think many people gave a chance. But in the end, this stakeholder process produced, with everybody at the same table, including the state, DOT, and both rail enthusiasts and rail critics, sitting together, produced a product that was passed unanimously by our board, that has put this in a position that we are today, where we're, hopefully weeks from having both parties able to move forward with their initiatives. We touch an awful lot of people. We do an awful lot of things that other people don't want to do, and I'm certain that just like in Sauk County, we do them very well. And it's a great source of pride when people come up to me and tell me that they contacted this county agency or this department, and not only did they get what they needed or get the information they needed, but they were treated right. I intend to be a hands-on president, not to micromanage or interfere,
Right.
but to accomplish. Not only is county government a huge challenge, it really is a huge challenge when you're not familiar with government at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so, one of the initiatives is to revamp and take a look at our training for new officials, to make sure that we get to them as soon as possible, to try and give them the tools and give them the background so that they can become effective and get up to speed as quickly as possible. The IT initiative, I think, can be huge. I think impact not only financially, but actually the way that we do business as counties. There are 72 counties in this state. We all do the same thing, and yet we all do them separately. What this initiative is about is getting counties to break down those geographical borders and work together to hopefully save money in both and leverage dollars. If I have a free moment, I'll, especially since he lives in Reedsburg, I'll go over and see my 2.5-year-old grandson and his older brother. But the 2.5-year-old intrigues me because I think that he's going to pay me back tenfold in the problems that his mother presented to me growing up. So, if he had been at the conference, he would have blown the thing up. But I'm not a joiner. I don't belong to clubs. I've been invited to join the clubs. Because I'm in the public sector and now a visible part for the past 8 years as board chair. On a Friday night, my wife and I will normally get done with work and go and find a fish fry somewhere and an opportunity to have a drink and just be by ourselves. I'm fairly religious about exercising. I had a heart attack in 2008 after the flood. I had 3 heart surgeries and so started cardiac rehab and decided that I would continue so that I didn't get in one of those large mental specimen tables again. When I had my heart attack, I was laying in bed and they had done the surgery, and my kids all came. My son flew home from New York, and all my kids were there. And of course, after the surgery, when they're ready to let you go home, they have a discharge nurse come in and tell you that you know what went on, and you know, perhaps some of the reason that caused it. And so, you know, the nurse gave me the speech that she's given probably 1,000 times before. You know, this is what you had done, this is what you should or shouldn't do. And then she said, any questions? Well, you know, normally at that point, you know, there's no question. Everybody's in shock and, you know, thinking that dad's gonna die or whatever. And no, that wasn't the point. My oldest son said, oh, well, does this mean that he won't be able to go to Star Cinema and have the giant refillable popcorn? And the nurse kind of looked at him and said, that's right. And then my oldest daughter said, oh, and he probably can't go to Pizza Ranch and fill his plate twice up with fried chicken. And, you know, her jaw kind of dropped a little, and she said, that would be right. And then my middle daughter said, oh, and I bet you that he can't have that big bowl of ice cream covered with chocolate right before he goes to bed at night. And at that point, the nurse looked at me and went, okay, now I know why you're here. I'm very proud of my children. I just, you know, the people that saw them at the conference saw that they obviously love each other. You know, not only as brothers and sisters, but as friends, and you know, there's no greater time in my life than when my family's together and being a family. As I said, I've got 8 grandchildren, 7 living. You know, something that has you know, resonated in not only my life, my wife's, and why you know, family is so important is that you know, we lost a grandchild to a brain tumor 2 years ago this Thanksgiving. In fact, he died on Thanksgiving Day. His name was Drew. My daughter and her husband did all they could for that little boy. In fact, you know, I don't want to be overly religious, but I do believe that no matter what faith you are, there is a plan out there for all of us. We like to think that we're in control. My heart attack taught me I'm not in control. That little boy endured everything trying to save him and never whimpered. So all I need to do is think of Drew, and when times get tough, and pretty quickly I understand that what I'm going through isn't tough at all. I remember when Annie had Drew. She was going to have the baby down in Madison, and then about 45 minutes later, I was just finishing stuff up, getting the directions to the hospital, and the phone rang again. I thought then it was Maureen asking me, but it was Ben again saying, well, we're taking her to the hospital. So I said, well, I'll go home and see if I can get Maureen up. And my other 2 daughters had been called, and went home, got my wife up. And you know, within an hour and a half of that call, my wife and my 3 daughters were all in the same room, helping bring Drew into the world. And that's happened every time. And a nurse came out and told me that she hoped I understood just how extraordinary that was. That, you know, Mom and her 3 daughters would be working together to help each other. So, but it happens every time. That's why we're a family.